Physics is a very cool feature of Animation Studio Pro. It allows you to automatically create animation that would take a lot longer doing it by hand, and then change the parameters and reanimate just with a couple clicks. So you don't have all that time invested that you would if you tried to by hand do some of the things that the physics engine does. What I want to do is have a ball that runs down these ramps. Now I want it to have a little bit of bounciness and go back and forth. And I could do that by hand, but man, it takes a long time. And when you see how easy it is to do, you'll want to keep playing with it. Physics is something you need to play with to just learn about it. Because you can also do things like create little motors. You can have things that spin of their own volition and interact with other objects, knocking them around or creating little motors. Really cool stuff. So I've got a first layer named ramp. Let me go ahead and create another one, which will be our ball. And I'll just name this ball. And then finally, we need to create a group for physics to happen in. Just like you create a bone layer, a physics group or a physics layer is just a plain old group, and you engage physics. So I'll choose group. We'll name it physics and click OK. Now I need to point out something really important because it will affect you at one point in time. I'm going to double click on ramps to open the options that go with the layer settings. Now, you'll notice across the top that there's no tabs listed right there that say physics. This is one of the contextual features of Animation Studio Pro. You only get the controls or see the controls you need to based on its function. Just like the tool palette updates depending on the layers you have selected, features and options only show up in layer settings when they're engaged in the master layer. So I'm going to click OK. Come to my physics layer, double click on it. This does have a physics tab because it's a group and not a layer itself. I'll click physics and we can simply enable the physics right here. I'll leave the gravity direction straight down and the magnitude at 10 and choose OK. Now I'll grab by shift clicking these two layers, the ramp and the balls, and drag them into the physics layer. I'll come to the ramps layer, and this isn't supposed to go anywhere. So when I open up the layer options by double clicking and go to the physics tab, which is now present on the top, physics has been automatically engaged, and I need to enable non-moving object. This will be true for any layer that has an object on it that you don't want to move, and choose OK. The ball itself, I'll double click on this. We'll come to physics. I do want this to be animated. We can go ahead and have it sleep at a certain point if we want to, and have the frames listed for that. We can also have an initial direction, like if this is a cannonball that got shot in from the side or something, so we can do that. This is where, on a per layer basis, we change the density, the friction, and the springiness of the object itself. Also, if we wanted to create a little motor, we could turn on pivot on origin if we wanted to, and play with some of the motor speeds and force field. Well, that's a repelling type of thing that pushes everything away. Really great fun to play with. So we need to draw a ball actually in our scene. Let me come over to the draw tool, choose the ellipse. I'm going to hold down the Option Alt key and then Shift to get a round ball drawn. Now here's something I need to point about working with layers and physics. When you have a single object in a layer inside of a physics envelope, it will rotate around the center of the object itself. If I drew another ball, it would start rotating around the center of the layer instead and totally misbehave. It'd be clunky going back and forth because it would think the center of the object was here. So if you want multiple balls, you actually have to have multiple layers with individual balls on them. I'm going to, just for my peace of mind, come to the layers palette right here and reset the origin right to the very center of the ball so I don't even have to worry about funny behaviors. With that completed and everything in our physics layer, all we have to do is hit play. The program automatically figures out the motion for us. Let's go ahead and stop this real quick and click on the ball layer itself. Look at all these keyframes that were automatically added to the scene. You just couldn't animate that and get it done well in the amount of time it took us to create this. If we go ahead and edit this and say, you know what, under physics, I want this to be slightly more bouncy. So we'll give it a bounciness or springiness of 6. And I actually want it to be a little bit heavier or more dense. So I'll give it a value of 2 and click OK. No reanimation required. All you have to do is click play. And we see now we get additional springiness, which charges it with more energy and sends it flying off the edge of the page. Really nice way to work. If you're interested, you can do this also with characters. I've created a very similar type of setup in here where we take the entire character rig and put it inside a physics group that we can work with. Now here is something that we need to talk about. This character has been created by the folks at Smith Micro with no joint or bone constraints. It's a total ragdoll. So when I run the physics right here, watch what happens. Our character crashes and the feet are connected with the anchors or bone anchors that we learned about in other movies. And so they spin like little motors because that's one of the things that happen with anchors. I also had to animate the actual hip bone to have it come down instead of stay in place. Now, I bring this up because if you want normal type of ragdoll physics where the body parts don't flip out and do strange things, constraints have to be applied to the bones. Also, on the bone layer, there is, let me go ahead and get our pirate layer going right here and come back to the very beginning of the animation. There's also a physics bone tool. When you select this, you have the option to individually assign behaviors to bones that would be affected by physics. So you can do that. If it's a motor, you can go ahead and give it some speed, some torque. We can have bones return to normal or actually lock the tips on them for different effects. Really cool tools and fun things to play with inside of Anime Studio Pro with physics.